Okay, hello, welcome back. I'm Celestial Astrology. I'm Sonia, and I'm welcoming with me my co-host Janessa from By Jove Astrology. And today we're going to be looking at your Astro weekly update for the 18th to the 25th of September. Hi, Janessa.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Thanks so much for joining me. We appreciate this. We've got a lot of weeks, it seems, this September.
Yeah.
I think we're doing 5 recordings. So this week we're looking from the 18th. We've just had lunar eclipse, so we won't go back over that because we talked about that last week. But we will look at Mercury opposite Saturn. Actually, I'll bring up the slide of all the dates. Right, so we looked at the lunar eclipse that's happening on the day that this is coming out last week, and Mercury was opposite Saturn on the same day. So we're starting on the 19th. We're looking at the Sun trine Uranus, and then the Sun opposite retrograde Neptune. Then we have Mercury square Jupiter, Sun trining Pluto. So with these trines with the Sun, they tend to be the point in the cycle with the Sun where these planets are either, they tell us that the planets are likely to be stationary in some way. They're either turning retrograde or direct. And with both of those planets, they have actually turned just before we've met. So I think that the trine is coming just after. And then on the 22nd, we've got the Sun entering Libra, which will be another change of gear. We always notice as we go into a Libra season, we're going into the darker half of the year now. So as the Sun has moved from Aries through to Virgo, these have been what we call the light halves of the month, where there's more light than darkness. And now we're moving into a place where there's less sun in the day. Literally, and the dark part of the day starts to get longer, like longer than the amount of sun that we get. Then we have Venus squaring Pluto. On the 22nd, Venus enters Scorpio, which will be another gear change because she's losing her dignity from Libra. Mercury trining Uranus. And I like this actually at the end. We get 3 Mercury connecting with all of the outers. This feels significant in some way. Like Mercury's got a significant message to bring through, that he's visiting all of these outers together. They're all, whenever the outers contact one of our inner planets, they're more personal to us. They affect our day-to-day doings. So we always pay attention when an outer is speaking to one of our personal planets like this. And Mercury traveling to a trine and opposition and back to a trine just feels significant that one's coming after the other within 2 days. Well, that's how I felt when I looked at them. I don't know. What do you think, Janessa, looking at this week that we've got ahead?
Yeah, that looks really cool. I'd agree that that's pretty significant. And I'm curious, once you pull up the charts, to look at where the moon's going to be during that time, because I feel like there's a big message here. And then a lot of times I like to work with the moon as like pulling, where is that pulling it all into like the earthly sphere, and like how is that getting translated to us as humans here?
Because the moon is the planet that orbits the Earth, as opposed to all these other planets that orbit the sun. So the moon acts as our translator, sort of. It contacts all of these other planets. It travels around in a month, contacting every single planet, collecting information, disseminating information, and then it's bringing it down to Earth for us all the time. That's kind of what the moon does. So yeah, I love that, Janessa. We'll take a close look at the moon as we get there. And then we've got this graphic that we looked at in more detail in the first week of September, if you want to go back to that conversation. But we just see the movements that we've just discussed. Mercury there, traveling up towards Libra. And we see Venus, now she's reaching Scorpio. She's leaving. This is her domicile home of Libra. And now she's entering into Scorpio. And again, Mercury there is having to think about leaving his home towards the end of the month, but we're not there yet. Yeah, we've got Mars still traveling through Cancer, and these are the areas that are being activated and the signs that are being activated as well. So we're looking at a lot of activity really for Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Libra, and we see the beginnings of Scorpio. But that does affect all of the cardinal signs, which Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And Janessa, could you run us through the fixed and the mutables?
Yep. So the fixed signs are Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. And then the mutables are Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius.
Okay, so we're looking at Uranus trine the Sun, and we see them both at 27 degrees, which is the degree that Uranus is traveling very, very slowly through. And the first thing that stood out to me was like this grand trine with Pluto. It's just a few degrees out, but we still see this earthy feeling. It's like a contact with Pluto, that's Pluto in Capricorn making its presence felt. I just feel the sun is illuminating here, Virgo. Uranus is the awakener, but he's going back over something that we've already experienced, and maybe we didn't fully get it. Maybe we need to be shown again. We're revising and reviewing it. And Uranus will go back forward over that degree. So that will be our last chance to like get it right, do it again if we think we need to. And the Sun and Pluto are really like showing us the way here, because Pluto's always also retrograde. And yeah, we tend to look at things within 3 degrees, and I think it's enough because it's within 2. Not exact, but they're applying. So the Sun will reach Pluto. So I think that's kind of, you wouldn't count Uranus and Pluto as being attached, but I think we could count the Sun, the Sun and Pluto there, and bring that grand Earth energy. And in Earth, we're looking at things that are very stable. If you think of rocks that stand the test of time, and it's very much what you think of with Capricorn, like the Earth builder. When something's built, it stands for a very long time, but it might not stand forever, especially things that humans build. You know, we have some structures from the ancients, but a lot of them are in ruins. They're not as they once looked. Maybe the Sun is showing some light on that. Maybe Uranus will be changing things, showing us what has to change, what structures have to go now, what we need to keep as Pluto moves into Aquarius, and what we need to move away from, because those are the important decisions that we're making at this time. How do you feel, Janessa?
Yeah, I think you've kind of covered most of it. I think there's always the element of surprise with Uranus, and like I wonder if there's just some last bits of information that we find out that's, getting illuminated with the Sun during this time about the last since 2008 of Pluto being in Capricorn. I wonder if there's some more to be revealed again here about what's been going on with that transit. And
Uranus and the Sun met. Oh, I've covered that, haven't I? Uranus and the Sun met at 23 Taurus. They were co-present with Venus and Jupiter, which was a really benefic signature. So they're going to be carrying that energy through this cycle. I feel something that Uranus and the Sun cooked up when they met. I always feel of like 2 co-conspirators having a meeting and making a plan for you, but you're not in on the information. They're deciding, well, where does she need to go? What does she need? What's she forgotten? What is it she doing that we really wanted to know? And they make all these decisions, and we know nothing about it. We're going on about our lives, and suddenly the squares bring our attention to it, or the trines ease us through it. Something about what they cooked up that was beneficial for us might be being revealed, which would be nice.
Yeah, I just am noticing the opposition to Neptune, which I think we'll cover separately maybe, but it's interesting that it's starting already during this time. So Neptune is just hard to know if it's like, is this illuminating the illusions? Like, is it revealing what maybe was being kept from us? Or like, is Neptune like clouding what is still, So I wonder about that. So that's very interesting. Very suspicious down there.
Yes, because you just never know with Neptune. You just got to surrender, and it's like you're traveling through a fog and you can't see things clearly. And I was recently shown a picture of like climbers on a mountain, and there's I can't remember what the word is for it, but they see in the fog, they see an image, and it looks like a man with a beautiful aura around him, but it's actually themselves reflected back where there's some of the sunlight filtered through. And it's like, that's so Neptunian, that there would be this fog and there's this image, but it's actually you.
And the sun opposite Neptune, that sounds exactly what's happening.
And just like look twice, because you could feel, where has this person come from, and why is he like looking all ethereal like that, and think you're being visited by a spirit or something, or maybe a threatening person, or I don't know what you would think, but actually it's quite a normal phenomenon that they experience when they're at that altitude and above those clouds and in that fog. I'm keeping that for Neptune. Like, such a great image, and and just that little aura that gets cast, that that I don't know whether that's the camera or whether the person sees that when they see the person, but I like to think that they do. I like to think that that's how it is. So yeah, I think that could be an interesting time. But yeah, to pay attention to what you're being shown then. Like anything about self-expression, or be careful not to take risks, but anything that's looking towards your independence, but bringing it into very grounded, practical ways, things that you can like really make a difference with in your life, because it is Earth. It's how are you really going to bring that into form. And then completes Neptune opposite the sun. Do you want to take us away with that?
So we've got Mercury there with the sun, and it's getting close to the sun where it would be like considered, that would be under the beams, I believe. But Mercury is in its own home sign and sign of exaltation, so it kind of has some special privileges where we would, consider it in his chariot there. I think that's the right language.
That's right.
So he's not too banged up. He's still able to the messenger that he wants to be, and definitely, being the mouthpiece for whatever's happening between the sun and Neptune there. Again, it's like unclear what is the message. Is the message the true message? Is the message an illusion? I would say investigate anything before taking action on like any information you receive that day, or these couple of days surrounding this. Don't just jump to conclusions, don't make assumptions. And yeah, we've got the moon is able to witness this, in Taurus over there. So, and that's a nice spot for the moon to be. Feels like potentially helpful. So yeah, I think kind of more of the same vibe that we were having in the previous chart, like the day or two before. So
yeah, we've got a lot of happy personal planets there, haven't we? Because we've got the moon in exaltation, so it's like being raised up and looked after very well. It's very comfortable there, and Mercury's very comfortable, like you say, in its chariot, which is like, sounds like a really fun place to be. Riding along with the sun, I always think of like a sidecar, and they're having laughs and giggles traveling along a sidecar together, or up in a chariot in the sky, just like traveling through together, laughing. And then we've still got Venus in Libra, so it's like, it's not very often that you get several of them all in a nice place at the same time. Yeah, we can enjoy it because the moon's only there for like 2.5 days, so it's only a brief snapshot of time, but it's worth catching. Yeah, the sun may also illuminate what the Neptune story is for us. This is like the halfway point in their cycle again, thinking about to that conspirators meeting. This is like full moon from that meeting, so you get the square, which is the tension, and it's asking you to take action. It's beginning to show you what it's about. But the full moon point of this opposition, that again is tension. It's the nature of Saturn, but it's also a time of revelations and things coming to light, so starting to understand what it might be about. But yeah, beware of the self-deception or escapism. Question things a little bit more deeply, particularly before you take action. There can be a lack of purpose. It's like a self-made guru who believes his own press and has all the yes men around them, and then meets the real world where people are questioning him, and it's not something they can really cope with too well, because they're too used to everybody blindly agreeing with everything. That happens in politics as well, doesn't it? You want a team where you're not surrounded by yes men. You want people to question, because as soon as you take something out to the public or to the press, you're going to get those questions. So you're better prepared if you've got people on your team raising them, so you can come up with answers beforehand rather than going out blind thinking, yeah, I've got this wonderful idea, and then everybody shoots it down in seconds because you haven't thought of all the problems with it. Yeah, so we've been waiting for that one. It was baked into the eclipse, and then just those few days later, it exact. And then we've got Jupiter square Mercury. So yeah, the players are talking to each other again. Jupiter's in Mercury's sign still at 20 degrees of Gemini. And we see Mercury still in the same place as he was for the Neptune opposition. In fact, it's the same day, isn't it? It's the same because the sun's at 28, still opposite Neptune. So it's virtually a T-square, isn't it, almost going on there. It's wide, but Jupiter holding that tension point between Mercury and the sun and Neptune. And then Jupiter there in Gemini wanting to grow something about our communications or projects or how we're thinking, our intellectual processes. And a lot of people say this transit of Jupiter through Gemini is about social media and AI and what's real and what isn't, and how we're communicating now, how people aren't watching the news, how they're getting their information from so many various sources, and how that sense of a central point has been lost. And how with AI and deep fakes, how do you even know? And what happens when you don't know? You just end up not believing anything. And that just seems like such a Neptunian thing, that you can just go into that, okay, it's just easier if I just don't believe a thing I read. And then where did you find the truth? Do you find the truth within yourself? And maybe that's Sun, Mercury, and Neptune asking us to, where is your truth? It's interesting actually looking at those phases that Gary Caton taught us about a recent lecture that I went to, because Mercury is now in its sage phase. As soon as it gets within 15 degrees, it changes its phase. So it's gone from philosopher now to sage, which is more of an elder, but more withdrawn from society, is how I see a sage versus a philosopher. A philosopher's more sharing that wisdom, whereas the sage is, okay, I'm just going to keep it for a select few. We need to approach Mercury carefully to get him to share his wisdom. But I think Jupiter over there is sharing quite freely. But it's, can we trust what's being shared? And let's hope that Mercury in his sage phase has some control over that, is reining it in. But with the sun opposite Neptune, those questions are quite big. And yeah, the archetypes that I wrote was like long books like War and Peace. And then it made me think, what's the modern equivalent? I'm thinking of things like these really extended series like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. You're not going to binge watch it in a week or a weekend. It's like, if you commit to watching it, you're really committing some serious time. But there's a lot there. It's like an epic. It's our equivalent of the Iliad. It's very much a questing energy. Did you want to add anything, Janessa?
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking about, again, like the planetary cycles and how this would be like the first quarter opening square from when Mercury met with Jupiter, kind of like a first peek at what they talked about when they met in private. And that first reveal of like the seedlings or whatever that are sprouting, and also an opportunity to like course correct if there's anything we missed, or it's revealing that first little seedling. So we'll get the full story when we hit the opposition and when Mercury makes its way over into Sagittarius. But for now, this is just like that soft launch.
Yeah, and we might be called to make adjustments. We don't know. Again, if it's affecting your chart, it's more likely to affect you. And we're looking there at the mutable signs: Virgo,
Gemini, Sagittarius, and Pisces.
We've got Pluto trine the sun. Do you want to take us away with this?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like this is probably similar to like the second stretch of, how we talked about at the beginning, where Mercury will make all of these same contacts with the outers, but it's like the illumination of things versus like the message maybe, or like the communication side of it. It's just kind of making things more obvious or revealing, and maybe to our benefit, being that it's a trine versus like the square in this case. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really shining a light on what the story is, what's the final what's the final say here on Pluto and Capricorn? Because I don't think that the sun will be able to make a square all the way. Maybe that's wrong. No, the sun will make a square still to Pluto before Pluto goes back into Aquarius, but this might be like a last helpful illumination of what that story is. And again, it's like very earthy, coming from Virgo and shining onto Capricorn. And then it's interesting that we have the moon over in Taurus still for this. The moon conjunct Uranus. It's like within the 3-degree range. So this could be a day where there is like some news or there is like a big reveal of something. And we have to remember, like, that's something I wanted to say too, is that all of the things happening this week and into the next week are happening in the eclipse season. So like between eclipses, which is always just a little dicey. So I think this looks like a powerful time of like illumination, of finding out new information. Yeah. In this day in particular, September 22nd, the sun's it's anaretic and it's about to go into Libra where it enters its fall. So, or sorry, not its fall. I get these flipped because I have all of the falls both in Libra and Scorpio. So it's like talking about them, I flip-flop them. But anyway, it will enter its detriment there because it would rather be in Aries. So it's just like a...
No, you heard it right. It's full.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So it's just kind of like...
Yeah, its detriment is Aquarius.
Yes, because I have Mars and Libra too. So then I flip it, and then I have the Moon and Venus and Scorpio. So I flip those. Like I know what they are when I stop and think about it, but when I'm talking,
it's hard to... Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting time. It's like we're really getting a lot of interaction with that Pluto at 29 degrees there overall. But this day in particular is big because of that Moon Uranus conjunction happening at the same time. And then it's just like kind of a big question mark, like what will be revealed? Because I feel like it's pretty clear something will be made visible this day.
I've got the dates. They were in conjunction on the 20th of January 2024. That's when the Sun and Pluto held their meeting, and that was at 29 Capricorn. Then they had the opening square on the 21st of April, trine on the 22nd of May, and an opposition in Leo in July. So now this circle is starting to close. So we're starting to release what we need to, whatever we've grown since the beginning of the year that the two of them decided on. We're deciding what we're keeping and what we're releasing in this phase. And I was also thinking about archetypes as well, like the significations are like this intense enthusiasm when the sun meets Pluto. They're both quite intense planets. And then there's like an interplay of ego and shadow and a struggle for self, being shown the shadow side of self. I was thinking about chaos. Been watching that show on Netflix and trying to find ways to apply it. And I mean, we do have Pluto actually as Hades, and we don't have the sun as a character. But I was thinking this is like the journey of Orpheus when he goes into the underworld, and you've kind of got Uranus and the moon there, his feelings, and all of a sudden changes as Dionysus comes in and starts. I mean, sorry if there's spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched it yet, but it's been out for a little while now, a week or two. So if you haven't watched it, it's a must-watch for anybody who's interested in this, because it'll really, it's like a retelling of the myths. So it's not true, the Greek myths, but it's not dating. It's a modern retelling, which is how myths evolved. I think they always fit the time and culture that they were told in. So we quite often get different versions. So like Medusa may have different names in different cultures, but there's always that archetype of her. And the story changes in different times and cultures, but the story also follows the same theme. And that's what the modern day storytelling does. It's the archetype and the theme that stays the same, and the actual details of the story can change to fit our times. It's very, very, I mean, there's so much richness in it. I can't wait to rewatch it, actually, to pick up so much that I think I might have missed, where there's so many like little jokes that you miss along the way while you're following the main plot line, and I want to go back and rewatch those. But we see Orpheus meet Hades in the underworld, and yeah, like I say, you see like his emotions, his deep love for Eurydice, and how he goes through this intense process to bring her back. You know, he's put all on the line, and the way that they try and return to the sun, or the way that that becomes his purpose, he gives up everything to follow her and do what he's doing. So I love how we can see those stories and then see them play out in the planets, and then when it comes to the day, see maybe if those themes echo in our own lives. I mean, you won't be see underworld, but it's like, what in your life are you losing that you feel so passionately about that you would go to any lengths to retrieve? It's kind of that kind of energy, and what sudden emotions and changes are affecting that and bringing in the twists and the changes, and are they still motivating you to still persist no matter what? Is there anything else?
No, I think that's a good note to end on.
Then we see the sun go into Libra, and yeah, like we said, it's entering its fall. And what's really nice up here is ingressing with Libra, with Venus, the ruler of Libra, still co-present. I mean, she's at the anaretic degrees. She's literally on her way out the door. The bags are packed. She's kind of handing over. It's Libra season, but she's not staying around for it, unfortunately. It would have been nice if she'd have stayed a little bit longer, because she gives her blessing, and we like to see the ruler in her domicile blessing it. And of course, once she travels into Scorpio, she won't be able to see the sun. And we find that's quite important in the way that we make our interpretations in astrology. It's all about casting the rays of light. So for Libra season, it is nice that for the ingress, at least, we have Venus there, that they've got this blending of their energies. And of course, we do have the South Node there, which is telling us that an eclipse is coming up soon in Libra. As soon as the moon travels and meets the sun there, create a new moon, we'll be having another eclipse coming up. And this is also the sign of Saturn's exaltation. So Saturn's important. And again, there's no sight of Saturn. So it's kind of like the sun will be left to its own devices once Venus leaves. Our teacher talks about if you go to an Airbnb, and if you've got a good line through to your host and they're responsive, and if you need towels or if you need directions somewhere or something, your requests are responded to quickly and easily. That's great, and that's what you get when you've got sight of your host. But if you can't see your host or your co-host, it makes things more difficult. And then you've got a sun that's already in full and no sight of either of its hosts. One of them's retrograde. That's not the best position to be in, I would say. I mean, we like that it's Venusian. That's always nice. Venus energy is always tick, and it's relationship oriented, and it's about bringing people together in Libra. But we want the sun to have a nice journey through there. So yeah, it's a bit sad to see that it might be a bit of a struggle for Libra season there, and for Librans, and for the cardinal placements, for the Capricorns, Aries, and
Cancer.
Capricorns, Aries, and Cancer, who are all squaring or opposite Libra, that might be affected. And again, as this sun moves here, this is going to be the time of Mabon, the equinox time, the fall equinox. So this is when we turn to the dark half of the year, as I said in the introduction. So the light hands over to the darkness, and the days start to draw in, and the balance turns more. So the light, we still have light, but it's losing strength, and the darkness is gaining strength. And we see the trees start to turn in their colours. They're going to lose their leaves. They start to go through that process, which is preparing for the winter time, which we find more when the sun reaches down into these wintry parts. In these parts, we can enjoy the autumnal colours and everything that are so glorious. So it can be a nice season, but it's a turning point of the year, and we can find that it's a turning point in our lives as well. And there can be a nuance in plot lines here, because there's a contradiction between ruler Venus being so Venusian and then co-ruler Saturn. I find that can bring the nuance and the heaviness to the lightness that Venus brings. And yeah, I think, what did you think?
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. I think it's nice that the moon is pretty close to a trine over in Gemini for the ingress. I think if I'm sure this has already been said probably with Krista, but like the mutual exaltation between Saturn and Venus is nice. That has helped Saturn out probably in particular. But yeah, it's an interesting ingress in that like it's like hello and goodbye at the same time. So
Yeah, that time of them being in mutual exaltation has been so nice, and then suddenly everything has to end. So we might feel the Saturn retrograde more as well. Do you want to take us away with Pluto square Venus?
Sure. So yeah, I think Pluto Venus is always interesting. I think that it usually can bring up things about women and feminine issues, especially on a global scale, with it being an outer planet connecting to the inner, and then of course depending on your individual chart. But yeah, they're in a square, which is very dynamic. It's very there's a lot of like tension and a lot of movement happening between the two planets, and it can be a little bit of a rougher aspect for it to make. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are potential like news stories happening around women and certain mistreatment of women, or whether it's laws about women, especially being in Libra. I'd wonder more about law in particular. But yeah, we've got Mercury at the same time, like edging closer to a trine with Pluto, and trining by whole sign. So there's a clear path to this, to whatever is being communicated. And then the same with like the moon in Gemini, kind of doubling down on lots of communication happening about whatever's going on, that Libra house. So yeah, I think that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, it's nice to see Venus is like in the superior position here. She's in her own domicile, and we look at like the planet that's stamping their authority. She's applying Pluto in that sense. So it's nice for once that she's got the upper hand, if you like, in the conversation.
Yeah, maybe it's like a justice piece of conversation.
Yeah, but with them both at the anaretic degree, it's not easy. It's not straightforward. And like the archetypes, I'm thinking about things like obsessive love or passive aggression, and love of power can be like a shadow side of that. And again, I don't know if you got that show over there, but we had a show that got very big, and it's still dominating the headlines because there's been a lot of court cases that have come out of it. So it seems very Venus in Libra squaring Pluto. But it was called Baby Reindeer, and it was about a real life stalking situation. And the guy who was stalked by this woman shared his story, and obviously shared it as it happened to him. And it came out that he'd had trauma in his past and everything, so he was sharing that. But at the same time, this woman had come into the bar where he was working, and he was just nice and pleasant to her, and she latched onto him. Turned out that she had a history of this, and so she started stalking him and made him like her target and inundated him and was like really controlling his life. And it was about how he handled that. And he owns like a lot of the mistakes he made in that, because a lot of the time he still considered her feelings. He couldn't help, because he himself had suffered abuse. He was still coming from a victim mentality where he was very concerned about her feelings. He didn't report her to the police at first, even though there was like incidents of violence against his girlfriend. He met somebody and started a relationship, and she wouldn't have it. And he was trying to avoid escalating the situation and trying to resolve it. And it was like this impossible situation to resolve, really, I suppose. And it took him a long time to really understand that. Yeah, it's kind of like, what was the breaking point for him? What was the point where he took action? And that comes up. The lady, what's happened is like the TikTok detectives have all got on the case and found the real life lady, because she had a history of stalking. So it didn't take a lot to actually find their case. and then find this lady in real life. So of course she's suffered consequences from it, and there's things that Netflix have maybe dramatized that aren't totally true to life that she's obviously questioning, and there are now court cases that they can't now discuss it, but it's like every other week you see headlines about it, and it just feels like this situation that, I mean, the fact that she was a lawyer, so she knew exactly how much she could get away with, what she was able to do and what she wasn't. And because she'd had experience of doing this in the past and being brought to justice and then escaping it because she had this upper hand. And you're just watching it in horror. Can this happen? How can this happen? And then when he seeks help and the help still isn't there, it's like, oh my goodness. So it's like, that is really such a great archetype. And I'm so gutted if you haven't got it, because it's so good for Venus Pluto. But also there's like the women as like being abducted and things like that, the Persephone story. And again, she appears in Chaos and she tells a different story, which I quite like. And but it's still how her story's been taken and told. And she's like, well, no, actually, I'm going to tell my story and it's different to that. What if I actually love Hades? What if I want to be here? What if it was my controlling mother that I'm escaping from? He says my mothers can tell this story. It's like, why can't I love Hades? So there's a lot about women and their emotions that can be controlled by Pluto, and Pluto then can expose all of this. And it can be quite shocking and unpleasant, but it's necessary that the truth does come out eventually. Of course, with Pluto, it takes a long time. Was there anything else?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. So we move on to Venus moving into Scorpio.
Yeah, so Venus enters Scorpio, where she is in her detriment. She would much rather be over in pleasant Taurus, in the green fields of Taurus, but she's entered the bog that is Scorpio. This is my start of my Venus return, so don't say this with any kind of judgment on anyone who might have a Scorpio Venus. So yeah, Venus in Scorpio is an interesting archetype. It's one, like as I said, Venus is at home in Libra and then also in Taurus, and being in Scorpio is like not being very comfortable for her. She doesn't have all of the resources that she would have in either of the other signs. She's kind of like a guest in a foreign land, and so she has to find ways to do what she wants to do, which is have relationships and share beauty and focus on that, but it has to all play out through that Scorpio filter. So being Scorpio, we're past the equinox at this point. We're really just in the dark tunnel heading down towards the bottom. Once we get to Sagittarius and get to the solstice, it's a fixed sign, so it's kind of like, I think of it as being one directional. It's carrying out what Libra started with the darkening. Yeah, it's not an easy place for Venus to be. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Venus and Scorpio?
Yeah, it's the only thing that's helping her is that she's got that trine to the ruler Mars. Mars is struggling as well through Cancer, and he's there for an extended time. So at least we know he's going to be there the whole time she's there. So that trine aspect gives some support and help. Mars is able to assist her. Whether she wants his help or not is another matter, sort of archetypally. But
yeah, it feels like very heavy on the feelings. We've got like the grand water trine with Venus and Scorpio and the two malefics, so it's very heavy on the waterworks.
And the ruler moon has no sight of Mars at the time of the ingress, so the moon can't help at all. So there's an absence of the nurturing that should be there to help Mars, which leaves Mars then deficient to help Libra, to help Venus. So yeah, it's not going to be an easy time for Libran topics, but then natives with Venus in Scorpio probably know all about that. You get used to that territory, you live through it every year of your life, I suppose. It's good that you can speak to other positives that you've experienced.
Yeah, I think Venus in Scorpio is really good at getting to like the heart of what matters. It's to its detriment, but like, really honing in on what do I actually need to feel complete or to feel good is a lot less maybe than I would think it is if I were Venus and Taurus. It's a little bit lighter on the material and a little bit heavier on needing like the emotional safety. And it's as a friend, like some Venus in Scorpio is like someone who's going to give it to you straight. There's it's a fixed sign again, so there's like a dedication that comes with that and like a devotion. So it's not all bad. I think it gets a bad rap. Venus and Scorpio is very committed and very, yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's deep. It's a deep one.
Of course, as she transits, she's going to be opposite Uranus in her own domicile there, the sun in Libra, that she's not able to see, so she can't help, and she's having tension with you. So the unexpected surprises that might come through for her aren't going to necessarily help her then. But I also like to think of Uranus as providing insights. When I think of them as the awakener, it's like waking you up to what you need to know, that kind of thing, of that sense of when your friends will see the penny drop of something that you've been resisting, and then it's like that sudden understanding of something that somebody might have been telling you. I mean, I've had that with people where I've asked them something or told them something and they haven't heard me, and then suddenly they understand it for themselves because of something else that happened or whatever. And that's how I see Uranus working. It's like that sudden, whatever they needed to understand, whatever we need to understand. So maybe whatever Venus needs to understand, things that she might have heard before, seen before, and it just hasn't quite clicked in the right way, that we might see happening. But of course, that's been the case for a few years now, as Uranus has been in Taurus, moving through there. But maybe with the retrograde, it might hit different. I don't know. See, so we've got Uranus trine Mercury at 27 degrees. Mercury, find him in Virgo still, but he's starting to reach the end of this lovely journey, and he's trining Uranus in Taurus. And this is the first of the three that we've got of Mercury speaking to these outer planets, receiving messages while he's in this sage phase. It seems like he's almost gone on a retreat, taken himself up a mountain, and he's in his cave and he's talking to the oracle of these outer planets, receiving these messages in this sage phase that he will be delivering to us, but maybe he's working with Jupiter and Gemini to do that. But also in Virgo, just the practicalities. I mean, it was me. I was trying to write an article. I kept getting distracted by different things, and then I suddenly realized I was working on the SEO for my YouTube, and I don't know why that happened. I think I might have got an email or something that distracted me, and I sent Janessa and the other girls a message saying that I've been doing that and was showing them the results. And then again, the penny dropped, like a Uranus thing of, oh, that's so Virgo. This is what Mercury wants me to be doing. Yes, he's distracting me from the writing to say, you need to do this now. This is something you need to do while I'm traveling through Virgo. This is one of your Mercury and Virgo tasks. So it's like that Mercury trine Uranus. When you find yourself doing something like that, I was setting something up that's going to last me longer, that maybe that writing, is published, whether it's published today or tomorrow, probably wasn't the end of the world, but what I've set up will be more lasting. So maybe Mercury really wanted that done while he was in Virgo, and that's why my attention was pulled away. And while I didn't understand it at the time, it was only when I sent those messages that it was like, right, yes, of course it's Virgo, that's what's going on. So they met, the conjunction was on the 31st of May when they met in Taurus, 31st of May at 24 degrees. And 21st of July was the opening square when we might have felt some adjustments. That might have been when the story started to become clear of what those two conspirators have cooked up for us. If you had events around that time, then it's likely that the story is playing out for you. That was the opening square. Then the next opposition will be at the end of October. We see can be a lightning quick mind. There can be originality and inventiveness and a flexibility. Just stay open to new ideas. Stay open to these sudden rabbit holes that you're pulled towards. I think, explore them all. I would say, at this time, and see what insights they hold for you. Hopefully it's good. Hopefully it's not a sudden event that's problematic. But I think in Earth, yeah, you don't want to think about landslides or anything like that. But those could be a problem around the globe. We might see. I don't like to go into mundane because I'm not really an expert at it, but it does make you think of that possibility. But I suppose we're seeing that with all of the Earth trines, but because it is a trine, it's more easeful. It's less likely to be a disaster. It's more likely to be something sometimes just not even noticed trines because they are easy. I think it's sometimes the difficulties that really get our attention when we're struggling with something, and that's when we message our friends and say, oh, what do I do? Or just to let them know, have a vent, just to say we're struggling with something. Whereas a trine, if something's easy, you just go with that flow and you carry on with your day, and you may not even notice it. What do you think?
Yeah, I've been thinking about Mercury and Uranus as like two birds of a feather, kind of. Like they both have trickster connotations, especially in traditional astrology when they don't use the outer planets. Mercury is like the trickster. And then once we hit modern and we use Uranus, Uranus is also the trickster. So it feels to me very playful, or very like, especially being a trine, that it's just kind of a lot of easy flow between them and maybe sharing jokes with each other that are earth-based in some way. That's kind of like the image that I'm getting.
That's nice. I like that. And then Mercury moves on to oppose Neptune. Do you want to take us away with that?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like this is kind of continuing the story, the sun making these aspects. Again, it's like Mercury being a mouthpiece. Are we getting the real story? Is what's being shared an illusion, or is it clarifying what was an illusion? I don't know if that's something we could ever know, like a mundane level at this point, to your points earlier about Neptune muddying the waters with communication. But yeah, I think it's kind of reiterating that, and maybe this is where whatever the sun was illuminating is now being communicated more broadly. Yeah, whatever Mercury and Neptune talked about when they were conjunct is now on full display. Whether that's the truth or whether that's another story being the trickster here, mixing with our foggy Neptune, is TBD.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're in a sextile right there, aren't they? So yeah, that conjunction happened on the 8th of March at 27 Pisces. So very close to where Neptune still is. So it's still got that energy. And then the opening square was the 17th of June in Gemini at 29 degrees, and that was conjunct the sun. So that was quite significant as well. And now we see Mercury empowered in his own domicile and exaltation, visible theoretically, but in his own chariot, although he's not with the sun anymore. So it's an out of sign, but the sun's rays are still reaching him there. I like to think of this as well as like an astrologer's aspect, where we we do all the mercurial work of learning to read a chart of aspects and houses and signs and planets, and what it all means and what the degrees mean, and what's combustion and what's exaltation and what's detriment. And then it's kind of over to the oracle, and you look at a chart and you in a way want to empty a part of yourself. You don't want to be too logical about it, and sometimes insight just flows from that, and you allow the chart to speak as well, to show you what the chart wants to say. So it's giving that energy of, as an archetype of meditation and mindfulness and sacred chant, but also the ancient seers and the oracles as well would likely have this sort of connection between Mercury and Neptune. Not that they would have, because they wouldn't have had the Neptune planet, but there's a Richard Burton quote, and he had Mercury and trine Neptune in his chart. And he said, a quiet mind cureth all. It's that thing of sometimes Mercury wants to be busy and doing things, and Neptune's saying, actually, no, just sit in the silence. And that's often when I'll get those realizations, or I'll be doing something mundane. I won't get to those deeper understandings when I'm studying or when I'm writing my notes or anything. They'll come, those dots will join up at the most random of times. Either meditating or loading the dishwasher or folding the laundry, whatever it is, but it's rarely when I'm actually writing. Because if Mercury's occupied, it's 2 Mercury, but call in a little bit of Neptune and you get that side of your brain engaged, and those dots join up in a deeper way. But the mercurial work had to be done first, that understanding of the chart. You can't come up it blank and look at it and have it mean anything at all, but it needs a balance of both, I suppose. Yeah. Did we have anything else to add there?
I think you got it.
Yeah, I mean, we just see Mercury getting closer to Pluto, but of course we'll come to that. Pluto trine Mercury, and that's at 29 degrees Virgo to Capricorn. So Mercury is really working hard with these outer planets and getting all this information from Pluto while he's in Capricorn. The conjunction was in Aquarius. Yeah, 0 Aquarius on the 5th of February, an opening square on the 17th of May in Taurus, and an opposition on the 3rd of July. And the next conjunction will be 1 Aquarius, and that will be in January. So yeah, this is kind of like the cherry on top of all these messages that Mercury's been collecting. He's still empowered and he's wanting to communicate with us, but from this place, this retreat in the mountain where he's gathered up all these messages, and maybe he needs to just process them himself first. This intensity of Pluto where it's bringing up all this shadow side, maybe he just needs to put together everything that Uranus and Neptune and Pluto have shown him and just get it all processed straight in his sage brain, and then the sage will be ready to sort of share. But this is really a passionate probing mind, this kind of aspect when we see it. And the archetype is like the death rebirth struggle of the mind, the way that our thoughts can sometimes help or impede a recovery. I mean, that's very much a mindfulness approach, is to highlight sometimes where thoughts are the obstacle, where somebody thinks the obstacle is something else and is telling themselves repeated stories about the obstacle. And then when you sit and work through it with them and we reframe it and we work with mindfulness, sometimes we can find that it's the thoughts and the stories about the thing that is the problem. And you work through like minor things first and see how the mind can tell these stories before you get to the actual problem that's causing them the problems, obviously, because there's emotions and past things attached to it. But sometimes when you've got that, then the emotions all just come up and it can become overwhelming. And then it can be an impossible kind of spiral to detach yourself from without some help. But we're seeing a trine here, which is easeful, but also people do say that trines to Pluto can hit different. So there could be shadow stuff coming up in the thoughts, and make sure that you reach out to somebody if something like that does come up that you're struggling with, especially because there's help there, there's friends, help available with other lines as well. But it's Mercury that's doing all this processing for us, and that he reaches a positive conclusion, and that it is about what we need to release in Capricorn. That if we're holding on, if you've done that releasing work, none of this will be necessary. If it's not aspecting your chart, it won't be necessary. I've gone a bit heavy there. What do you think, Janessa?
It's giving like word vomit to me, like a purging quality with Pluto kind of like being a little bit volcanic or like eruptive. I feel like it is a trine, so it might not be quite as like violent, but like it's kind of like it feels like there's been a buildup of all of these meetings with the outers for Mercury. Mercury's been through a lot. It's now at that 29th anaretic degree where it's kind of like, and getting close to the sun where it might be like malfunctioning a little bit, and I might just be like literally spewing all of the information overload, and maybe saying too much, or just like a deluge of information being revealed. So I guess that's where my head is at with the Mercury Pluto.
Yeah, I like that word vomit. It's nice. And that closes out our week for you. So I hope that goes well for you. And we will be back just to cover the 25th to the 1st of October. So thank you, Janessa, for joining me. Do you want to remind people where to find you?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. You can find my work at byjoveastrology.com. I am open for readings, both recorded and one-on-one virtually. And I also have a podcast called The Astro Garden. You can find me on social media, on Instagram with that at _astro_garden. And you can find that on all streaming platforms.
Fantastic. That's really great. And it's really good as well. I really recommend checking that out. Yeah, you can find me at celestialastrology.com and on my YouTube channel. And we both have Substack as well. So take a look at the writing there. And we share this on Substack and YouTube. And I usually promote it on Instagram as well. But you can find me everywhere at Celestial Astrology. Okay, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us for the weekly forecast. You often hear creators ask you, could you please like and subscribe? And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for small channels. It really does make the difference. And also we all want to reach the audience that our content is made for. And we can do this with your help if you've enjoyed it. It gives us immediate feedback on what you're enjoying and what you would like more of. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's a great way for you to support our work and just let us know that you're enjoying what we're doing. So if you have enjoyed this content through to the end and you'd like us to keep making it and make more of it, that's a great way for you to let us know. So wherever you're watching this, please do give us a thumbs up and give us your support. And we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.